Welcome to Tip Tuesday. Will 20Man here, and today we're going to look at building a reverse trace report. So for our example data, what we have here is a production unit that was calibrated on 5.1. This was calibrated by floor standard. So this is just a standard that's used on a regular basis to do the calibrations of production equipment, and it was calibrated on 6.6 using the lab standard. And so the idea here would be the lab standard, this is the one that gets sent out to NIST or wherever your external cal lab is, and it comes back out of tolerance. So we would want to look at a reverse trace report to see what all it was used on. And so building out the reverse trace report, you can see here we have lab standard. It calibrated the floor standard on 6.6, which calibrated the floor UUT on 5.1. And so the question becomes, how do we build that out? So the way we build this out is I'm just going to build a new equipment pipeline here based on what I did here. So first of all, we want information about the standard itself. So we'll go to the equipment, which is pulling the gauges table. And that is something we're going to grab because we're going to want the company it's in, the ID, probably want the manufacturer, model number, things like that. Then the next thing we're going to want is the events masters, which is down here. And that's actually the trace2 table. And so you'll notice this join pops up, and that's all wrong. What we really want to do is take the trace company, goes to the company, trace ID goes to the ID. So this is saying that equipment that we choose first is the master used on the calibration of some other piece of equipment. And really the only reason we care about that is so that we can then go down and grab the event information. So again, we have this events, and this will default to a left outer join, but really I think for this I'll do an inner join, and it's just the event numbers match. From here, now we have the event it was used as a calibration on, but we probably want the actual equipment. So for this last step, we're going to come back to the equipment, and get rid of everything except the companies and the IDs matching. So the ID goes to gauge SN. And so that gives us the information, so we can then say we have, as we scroll down, we have the event date, the event time, maybe grab the event type so we could know if it's a calibration or something special, and the company ID and manufacturer model of the unit being calibrated. So this gives us all of our fields. They should look very familiar over on the left. And the other thing we'll probably want to do is have some search criteria. So we'll probably have, for example, the company and ID of our master. We could make those auto search, maybe be mandatory. And you're generally going to know that this master was last calibrated on a particular date, its previous calibration, and so we're going to care in particular about the date range. And so we might say we want the date to be between these two values, again auto search, and we'll also toss in a search or a sort, so we can say, for example, if we're looking at multiple masters, maybe we sort by company and ID of the master. And then for any equipment that comes back, maybe we're going to sort by company and ID. Maybe we're going to sort by when it was calibrated. So you can kind of play around with that as you see fit. Just whatever sort order works the best for you. So that's how we build out our search. Now, in this case, I've got this equipment, and so that gives me all of this information that you see right here. And if that's all I had, my report would look like this. And so you could have a whole bunch of items, and you can see I've got the last cal date, I've got an event date. So I'm looking at possibly grab a whole bunch of masters. It depends on what you want to do. However, especially since this floor standard we know is in and of itself a master, well, now we have another problem, which is what all did it calibrate? Because the lab standard's out, well, that means the floor standard calibration may be invalid. We may want to know the full scope. So here, I'm going to take this event masters, and it's almost the same thing. So for the equipment, I had equipment, events, masters, events, equipment. Here, I've got events, masters, events, equipment. And the way I linked these together was with this link button, so that I said the trace company here matches with the company, trace ID matches with the ID. So the company and ID 2, these are the items that were calibrated. Well, now that's a master, and we go forward. And so on the design, all I have to do is grab a subreport here, which I dropped in, mark it as the event masters, and then we set up the details almost the same way. Grab in the company, the ID, manufacturer, model number of the equipment calibrated, date, time, and event type. And so now this gives us a 2-level report where we've got our primary standard for our lab, our secondary standard for our lab, which was then used to calibrate this equipment. And then you can take this and get more and more and more sophisticated. So you could maybe take, the schedule information for all of the equipment, bring those in, make things more complicated. If you have 3 levels of standards, you could easily take what you did here, make yet another copy, link this company and ID to another copy of the events masters. So you can take this through several layers as needed. And this gives you a reverse trace report that has all the information you potentially could want.